Oh my God, there's people yelling on the other side of the glass. Save us, Eric. We need to run.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live today is Sunday, June 16th, 2019, unless you're watching this later. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week,
Eric Murphy.
Yes.
Yep.
That's it. We're done.
Yep.
No, it's, so first of all, it's Pride Month.
It is.
So cool. Enjoy your pride if you're doing that. By the way, if you're one of those idiots who ask, what have you got to be proud about being gay? You probably could, do a half a second's worth of research to figure out that when people are constantly telling people that they should be ashamed for who they are, pride is a natural, actual response. They're not appreciating their achievement of becoming LGBTQ. They are recognizing that you don't get to shit all over them for being who they are. So, and that means that the pumpkin-loving, Make America Straight Again haters having their little conference in Orlando, yeah, we see you and we are demolishing you. So,
cheers to that. It's Father's Day as well.
Wait for pumpkins. Yeah, in October. Yeah. It is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everybody. I already called my dad today to tell him Happy Father's Day. And while I know I talked about the birthday card and other stuff, I still get along with my folks. I still love my folks. My dad is awesome. Worked his ass off for his entire life. Still working. Not yet retired. And I'm actually looking forward to the day when he feels comfortable retiring. But it's not a rush. I'm never going to get to retire. I already know that. I'll work till I'm dead.
Oh, dude, but that's because you want to.
Yeah, well, it's also because I'm a broke son of a bitch. No, it's good stuff. And so...
if you want to change that, the Atheist Debates, he can't say it because it'll be weird, but he does the Atheist Debates if you want to support Matt.
Oh, yeah, patreon.com/Atheist Debates. And,
but if you want to support this
debates
show.
Coming up, yes. And that's worth reminding because you're actually watching like the live chat and everything else.
I am.
But thank you to all the patrons for the Atheist Experience, the Atheist Community of Austin, Talk Heathen, I don't know, everything. And also thanks to you people who aren't actually patrons because we're going to do this show no matter what. So getting the support from people is good. Yeah. And it's nice to know that there are people who are benefiting and appreciating the work that everybody involved with all these shows doing, including the people on the other side over there, which I know Silas wasn't ready for, so he's not going to show you now. But I'm vamping to give him enough time to actually do it.
We love and appreciate them very much. There they are. Those are the people who actually make this happen. Yay. Those are the ones who make this work. Thank you so much.
There's the Lord of Levels himself. So there are other potential announcements. There's a bunch of stuff going on at the ACA. Next week, Don Baker's going to be on here with me, and we're going to... Don doesn't know this yet. So hi, Don. We're going to talk a little bit about... we'll still take calls like normal, but we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the ACA, history of the Atheist Experience, because he's done it actually longer than I have, and what's coming up and what changes, and we're all excited.
Oh, yeah. Personally, also, I'm going to be in Tennessee. Hi, Jen. For the Ask and Wonder event. So if anybody's down in Tennessee, it's going to be at the Donaldson Fellowship at 6 to 8 p.m. And after that, I'm going to meet up with fans at McNamara's Irish Pub.
6 to 8 p.m. what day?
Oh, that would be good. June 22nd. So if you're down in the area, come give me a shout. I'm not going to be on the shows next weekend for that reason, but loving it, man.
You're doing like a team debate against a couple of presupps.
Presuppositional apologists. Yes, I hate myself, apparently.
I got over that self-loathing right after I finished with that guy.
Okay.
That guy.
Okay.
I guess that's it. I don't have any more announcements.
Dude, let's dive into calls. That's what people want.
All right. We're going to start with, is it Rao?
R-A-O.
R-A-O. Oh, it's all caps. R-A-O in Wyoming. You're on with Matt and Eric.
Well, it's great to talk to y'all. Great to talk to you again, Eric. And
hello.
It's an honor to finally get to talk to you, Matt.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to interrupt you because I have one more announcement-y thing that I did forget, and it was literally sitting right here, right in front of my face. I got a wonderful T-shirt today from the Atheist Community of Lubbock. So for all those people, all those times where I joked, where I said, "Oh, I don't," people would say, "Aren't you terrified doing the show in Texas?" And I'd say, "Well, not in Austin, but maybe in Lubbock." Now I would not be terrified to do the show in Lubbock as well. So kudos to that community. What do you got for us, Ario? Is that like Ario Speedwagon, and you just changed it?
It was supposed to be, but when I was born, my dad had hit the tequila a little bit hard. He'd managed to misspell 3 letters that don't even make a word.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's unique.
Yeah. Well, I can add the one and only to my name without adding my last name.
Sweet.
Sure.
So anyway, you wanted to call in specifically to prove something to me?
Well, I've actually been working on this argument for about 3 months because I know that at any point in time I'm about 3 words away from a checkmate with you. So,
A checkmate which direction?
I'm 3 words from a loss at any given time. So that's why I spent 3 months working on this argument.
Okay. I'm eager to hear it.
I can demonstrate how you worship a god, regardless of whether or not, or a deity, whether or not you believe in it. And
that's not possible.
Don't believe
Matt,
in it,
you've been holding out on me.
Your worship of that god.
No, that's not possible because worship is an act of volition. It is impossible to worship something without being aware of it.
Well, can you worship your own personal virtues?
I don't even know what that looks like.
So, first of all,
well,
you'd have to define worship, but I would argue that one could worship anything, but that still is a position where the act of worship is an act of volition. The best you could ever do is say, oh, you really respect your own values, and I'm going to call that worship, and then I'm going to say you worship a deity. And you would be wrong on every count except for the fact that I value my values.
Well, it's not just that you value them, but you have basically dedicated the last 25 years of your life to your values. And your life as you know it would not be as it is now without those values.
I completely agree. And yet it's not worship and it's not a god. Are those 2 of the 3 words that you were worried about, worship and God? Because those are kind of big.
Well, I wasn't really worried about the God part, but it was just more into if we...
RAO, how do you define worship?
Worship.
Yeah, how do you define worship? Because it sounds like that's our sticking point.
It would be a dedication to your lifestyle, to your values and your virtues.
Okay, I have no objection to that.
No matter what. So,
is there anybody that doesn't have a dedication to their values? I mean, I'm sure that somebody does, but generally speaking, if you value something, all you're basically arguing is that I value my values.
Right. And they are deified.
They're not deified. My values aren't a god. See, this is. I'm sorry, Ario, but this is a game that a lot of people play that is, I think semantics are important because it's about what words mean and how they're used. So I don't ever say, oh, this is just a semantic argument. But what you're doing is you're playing a game. My position as an atheist is that I do not believe in any deities, any actual supernatural deities of any kind. If your argument is, well, there's something that you value, and I'm going to claim that that is your God that you worship, you're just playing word games because it's not a God and I don't worship it.
Because your personal values have already been perfectly deified by a deity that's existed before, or not existed, but has been recorded before.
Even if that was true, which I don't see how you can demonstrate that that's true, but even if it were true that there was a God that was entirely consistent with my deities or with my values, that doesn't mean my values have been deified, and certainly not by me, because there are things that I value that Eric also values. Does that mean that I worship Eric?
No.
Correct.
Eric's not been a deified version of those values and virtues.
It doesn't matter if something has been deified. I don't worship that.
Right, and it would not work if it weren't your specific virtues and values, because you have an unrelenting pursuit for wisdom, and you have a tactical aptitude that would bring a metaphorical tear of joy to Sun Tzu's eye.
That was
your
nice
values and virtues. And those values and virtues are perfectly deified by Athena.
No, they're not.
And
no, they're not, because Athena is, even if you're correct, Athena is those values plus something, and it's the plus something that deifies it, not the values. It's the personification and the position of power and the position of being in a God status, none of which I acknowledge or worship. The fact that Athena, whether she existed or not, shares my values is completely irrelevant to whether or not my values are being worshipped by me. They're not. And they're not a god.
Now, because you do not believe in Athena, but because of your agnostic atheism, where you would say, if Athena were to prove that she exists and show that she is worthy to be worshipped, you would.
No, I wouldn't. Stop pretending you can read my fucking mind. I wouldn't. If a God showed up, right here in the studio and said, I share all of your values, I would say, good for you. It's clear we both think alike. I wouldn't worship that person, that being, that agent, that God.
Even if they had...
Even if anything, there's literally nothing you can put on the end of that sentence that would cause me to worship it. I am, if anything, vehemently opposed to the very concept of worship. Any being deserving of worship would never require or demand it. And any being that I would consider potentially worthy of worship, I still wouldn't worship, because worship itself is an act of volition that devalues the self and places something else above it. Now, that something else needs to be, for any useful purpose for this show, some sort of a God thing. Could I worship my values? Sure. Is that really what's happening? No.
And does it get you any closer to convincing either of us that a God exists, or is this just a game?
And
what's your goal here, dude?
My values can change and have changed.
This was a spar to figure out where I'm going wrong.
Okay. I can tell you where you're going wrong. What a lot of people do is they begin with this notion of a God. And then they realize that we don't have good evidence for any of the supernatural gods, the Christian God, the Jewish God, any of those. But they really value the concept. And so they try to find a way to hang on to it. And they do that by saying, well, you may not worship a supernatural being, but you still worship. They do the same thing with faith. Well, you may not have faith in the sense that this is evidence for the supernatural, but you have faith in the sense of confidence. These are the word games that get us nowhere. Even if you had called in and said, Matt worships his values and has deified them, if I agreed with all that, it fundamentally wouldn't change anything about this show, but I don't agree with it. It doesn't make me not an atheist. It doesn't prove that a God exists. You're just saying Matt has values that he values, and I'm going to say that he's worshiping them as if they were a deity. Well, you're wrong, and you're right, but it's irrelevant.
Hope that helped.
This was practice. I've never talked to Matt firsthand before. I've heard his arguments. I've looked into him a lot. I haven't heard this specific argument yet, so I wanted to see where he would go with a new take.
Okay. That's where I'd go today.
All right.
Tomorrow I might go somewhere different. Because my values can change.
Thank you for y'all's time. And I'd actually like to email you sometime and give you my Genesis 1 argument, because I can show how, whether Yahweh exists or not, Genesis 1 shows that he shouldn't be worshipped.
Oh, well, I don't think you're going to get any disagreement from us on that, but that's like saying I'd like to email you my dissertation on Voldemort and why he shouldn't be respected.
We're good.
Right, but it's another argument that I haven't heard from you before, I find it more thorough to be able to show a God shouldn't be worshipped, whether they exist or not, than just showing that you don't have evidence that a God exists.
If you want to flesh that piece out and you really want to do some biblical interpretation and all of that stuff, it doesn't help going to people that you're on the same side of. Take it to a Christian, and you might be able to get a very, very good explanation from one Christian, and then you go to the next one, and they might have a totally different interpretation, but that really doesn't impact where we're at.
Yeah, and in any case, they'll give you what their honest responses as to potentially why they worship or why they disagree. We already agree. If the God of the Bible exists, he's unworthy of worship. You don't have to convince me. I've been convinced of that for 20 years.
Right, but it's just another, something to put in your toolbox.
Okay. It's been in my toolbox for 20 years.
We're glad it's in yours.
Right, well,
Hey, it's one of those. It's one of those ones. I'm not poo-pooing it. Eric and I are both saying, "Hey, by all means, go talk to the people who believe this. They're going to be better at explaining to you where they think you went wrong, rather than talking with people who already agree with you." But one of the things is there are two separate issues. Is there evidence for God? And after you reach the point where you could conclude that there was evidence for a God, then the secondary question becomes, is that God deserving of worship? Now, the second question for me has always been the easiest to answer. No. No, 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 no. The first question is also pretty easy. No, although I've changed my mind on how I talk about evidence for God, but it looks like we have like 4 callers who want to give us evidence for God.
Yeah, there's one other thing I want to throw in there, and that is we get these emails pretty often, and there are people saying, look, I have the absolute perfect destruction of Christianity. And it winds up being an interpretation of the Bible or saying, well, they have to accept this and therefore everything is wrong. Unfortunately, that's just not how it works. When it comes to believers, we meet them where they're at. And we can't presuppose that they are taking specific views. We have to meet them where they're at. And so what might work with someone who takes Genesis literally wouldn't work with someone who said, "Oh no, that's just a story in there. It didn't actually happen."
Yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of.
Yeah, but there are no silver bullets.
An argument against a fundamentalist will be completely different than an argument against an apologist.
Yeah, but one of the things that you have to realize, I get it, it takes a little while. There's no silver bullet argument. But at the end of the day, telling someone that the God they worship is evil may not expose any problem. Because I can tell you that at some point, while I was still a Southern Baptist, anybody who raised any objections about the God of the Bible being potentially evil or malicious or unworthy of worship, they simply didn't understand. If he's the ultimate arbiter of morality and justice, then by definition, whatever he does is right, and we as fallen creatures who can't possibly understand what God's ways must necessarily be wrong. And while that is a load of horse shit, it is incredibly convincing to people who already believe. And so the whole "your God is evil" argument is not going to carry any weight.
You can't indict the president even if you know he did it.
Well, I think you can. That's a separate issue. We're not going down that road today.
Right. But I see a lot. I see a lot of where you're coming from, and I mean, thank you for helping me out with this. And
well, you're welcome. I'm glad you called. And by the way, RAO, you take it on the run because it's time for me to fly. Oh, dad jokes on Father's Day. How could you not expect that?
No, I'm calling shenanigans. No, okay.
That's bullshit because REO Speedwagon is friggin' awesome.
I'm not, okay.
See.
Let's move on to Cory in New York.
Dad jokes. Cory, welcome to the show. You're on with Matt and Eric.
Okay, I got a question.
Cool.
Do you believe God owes you proof of his existence?
Well, I don't think that a God exists, but if a God exists, the only way a God could owe me proof of its existence is if it were in a position to judge me based on the conclusion I reached. So if a God wants me to believe that he exists and then offers no evidence for it, that God is an immoral piece of crap.
Oh, okay. So he does owe you proof.
Well, if I don't know, it depends on which God we're talking about. If there's a God that just exists and doesn't care what I believe, then that God doesn't owe me anything.
What God are you talking about?
Why?
Because you called?
Yeah. Oh, the God of the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you believe the God of the
Which
Bible.
Which God of the Bible? The Jewish God, the Christian God, the Catholic God, the Episcopalian God, the First Baptist Church God, the Second Baptist Church God?
I believe in one God.
Well, yes, that's what.
Wait, do you think there's more than one?
No, but there's more than one God.
Well, it sounds like that's what you're claiming.
No, I'm saying there's more than one God.
Well, no.
Are you just going to keep interrupting, or am I going to hang up?
Well, no, what you're saying.
Are you going to keep interrupting, or am I going to hang up?
Cory, I suggest you let the man talk.
I'm saying there are many different ideas about God, many different God concepts. What a Southern Baptist believes God to be is different from what a Jew believes God to be. It's different from what a Catholic believes God to be, despite the fact that they're using some of the same source material. So all we were asking is, which God are you talking about? Because if we talk about a God that's not yours,
then we're being dishonest.
We're wasting time.
It would be rude of us to expect that you're going to take the position of somebody who believes in the Quran, wouldn't it? If I said, well, how dare you because you believe this in the Quran, wouldn't that be absolutely that there's no point to it? So this is a question to clarify.
Yeah, all we were asking was, which God do you believe in? And you said God of the Bible, and we asked which one. We're just asking for clarification. I don't know why you got so defensive about it.
Well, no, I'm just saying you're differentiating between God and denominations. I'm just saying I believe there's one God.
I know you do. Which fucking God is it? We've already done this.
The God of the Bible.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're not going to give us anything to go with, then we're gonna go. I mean, really, because it's
why do you need
crazy
my help?
making? Because
it's a call-in show, dumbass. Next.
And hold on, just to clarify, we could have taken the position that you took everything in the Bible absolutely literally and raked you over the coals for things that you don't accept. You could take half the Bible figuratively and cherry pick throughout it, and we can go over all of those different things. There are so many different pieces that if we're not specific, if we don't talk about what it is that you are believing, there's no point. We have other callers.
I don't know. It's frustrating because it's a call-in show, and the point of the show is for people to call in and tell us what they believe and why so that we can discuss it and find out if we agree or not. And yet we ask a simple question, and we get an extremely simple answer that isn't complete enough. And one of the things that is the biggest mistake an atheist can make, which I've cautioned people about many times, is, for example, Catholic doctrine and Baptist doctrine, two completely different things. And so if you are believing in Baptist doctrine about a God, and I challenge you by saying, well, you believe that the Eucharist actually transubstantiates into the literal body of Christ, I'm no longer addressing what you believe. I'm talking about what Catholics believe. Actually, I'm talking about what Catholics are supposed to believe, even though a good chunk of them don't. But that's true for everything the Catholic Church puts out. The Catholics just decide, I'm okay with contraception. I'm okay with abortion, whatever. We ask questions so that we can actually get to what somebody believes, because I can argue against 1,000 different God concepts, and if I argue for an hour on 900 of them and never get near yours, then we've wasted your time and ours. That was the whole point.
Yep. Dude, I got nothing to add to it.
It's just when somebody calls into a call-in show and gets asked a question and then their response is, why do you need my help? I don't know. It's a call-in show. Because if you'd never called in, Eric and I would not have been talking about your God at all, probably.
Oh, we still don't know if we're talking about your God.
Well, we're not. We're now on to Patrick in Ohio. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, Patrick.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing all right.
Salty.
I have to say, Matt, that as a theist, I've always wanted to speak with you, and I am happy for the opportunity to talk with you about God.
Thank you.
Well, then.
Which God?
Can I join the conversation, too?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I have irrefutable evidence of God.
Wait, did you say irrefutable? You said irrefutable evidence for God?
Irrefutable evidence for God.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Cool.
Come
Well,
on, I'm excited.
we won't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Then.
All right, go for it.
Absolutely. I think this ties into your, you said you were a Baptist, correct?
Once upon a time, yeah.
I was a born-again Christian.
Okay, I thank you for saying that, born-again Christian. Okay, so I would say that the irrefutable evidence of God, have you ever heard of the Acts 2:38 experience?
I don't know.
Oh, my gosh. That's ringing a bell, dude. You got to keep going because I'm...
Okay, sure. Acts 2:38, Peter said, be baptized in Jesus' name and receive the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. That's the new birth experience according to the Bible. That's the new birth experience.
Okay.
I think a lot of times where people get it a little bit maybe confused is that they think that there's another form of salvation somewhere else in the scriptures, but the scriptures teach that. And when you have that experience, that is the proof of God's existence.
So the problem is that if you pick up, for example, a red letter edition of the Bible where you can see the words that are actually attributed to Jesus, the passage in Acts is not, and yet Jesus is directly asked, what must I do to be saved? And then Jesus answers that question. So how do you reconcile what Jesus said about what must one do to be saved with the Acts 2:38 passage?
Sure. if you look at all four Gospels, Jesus did say that you have to be born again. You have to be born of the water. That's the baptism in Jesus' name, and of the Spirit. That's John, I do believe, 3:5. And
no, but I'm talking about when Jesus is specifically asked, "What must I do to be saved?" What did Jesus say?
Mm-hmm. I can't recall specifically.
He said, "Keep the commandments," and then the person asked, I've done this all my days. What else?" And Jesus said, "Sell your belongings and give the money to the poor."
Correct.
Okay, that's what Jesus says to do to be saved. At no point when Jesus is asked what somebody must do to be saved does he say anything about baptism or Holy Spirit or any of that. And so
he actually does.
No, not when he's directly asked, "What must I do to be saved?" That occurs once. But anyway, I'm going to set that aside because we're still talking about, you're talking about a passage in the Bible that gives a description of requirements for salvation, and I'm pointing out that there's a different one directly from the horse's mouth, supposedly, that differs. But you said you had irrefutable proof or evidence for God, so we should get to that.
I don't know. I really liked that last thing that was going on. That was fun.
We can get back to that, but I want the irrefutable evidence for God.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, convert us. We've got other things that we could do on Sundays.
Sure, because a lot of times people have arguments for God, but until you experience the Acts 2:38 experience, that his holy power to convert you is the experience to let you know that he's real.
Okay, so
I've been baptized.
He's talking about specifically. Yes, we've both been baptized in Jesus' names. I'm a Baptist, or was a Baptist. That's the thing.
And as a teenager, I was anointed with oils.
But what I didn't do was speak in tongues. Is that an element that you're saying is required for salvation?
Yes.
Okay, so you have a doctrine that departs from most of the rest, because most of the rest of Christian doctrines don't require speaking in tongues. However, is it speaking? Here's the question. Is speaking in tongues the irrefutable evidence for God that you're talking about?
Both that and the baptism in Jesus' name.
Okay, baptism, I can baptize Eric in Jesus' name right now. That is in no way proof of a God or even evidence for a God. A person doing something in the name of God is not in any way evidence for the name of God, for God. Because I could baptize Eric in the name of Lord Voldemort. I could baptize Eric in any name. So that's not evidence for God. Also, speaking in tongues is not evidence for God. It's called glossolalia. It is in some cases, it is a symptom of some mental conditions, but also in many cases, it's just faked. So, for example, I had a friend who was best friends with a Pentecostal, and Pentecostals had this requirement that at age 13, you demonstrate that you have been filled with the Spirit by actually speaking in tongues. I think it's age 13. It's around there. And so he's standing up in front of the church. And they're expecting him to speak in tongues. And he looks at the pastor and he says, "I don't know what to do." And the pastor says, "Just fake it. We all do." Now, I'm not saying everybody fakes it. That's not the point. The point is it can be faked. It has been faked. Sure. And so there is no way for somebody like me to observe someone speaking in tongues and be able to tell at all whether they are actually speaking in a heavenly language in the case that would be evidence for a God, or if they are just babbling incoherently. Now, from what we know,
you need the experience yourself.
Yeah, so what you're basically arguing is that one must experience God to have the evidence for God. And if that's true, then it's not evidence for God because it doesn't serve as proof for anybody. Revelation is necessarily first person. To everybody else, it's hearsay. That's a la David Hume. The thing is, even for the first person, let's say you feel elated, you feel an experience, as we both have in church, and the people around you are saying, that's being filled with the Holy Spirit. I was convinced that I'd been filled with the Holy Spirit while I was in church. I was mistaken. There is no way for any individual human being, flawed thinker, to take their experience and say, it feels like what's been described as being filled with the Holy Spirit, therefore it is, and therefore I'm rationally justified in believing in a God. That cannot happen. That's exactly the same as someone saying, I saw a ghost, therefore this is evidence of the supernatural. That is flawed.
I'll tell you what, I think you have somewhat of a background in the scriptures. I would love to have some type of debate with you about the scriptures. Would you be interested in that, Matt?
We're on the show. It happens all the time.
Yep.
Okay.
If you're talking about like a big public formal debate, well, yeah, you can pay me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, that's one of the ways I make my living is doing big debates. This is the spot where you get to call in debaters for free.
Yep.
Sure, absolutely. So let me go back to that very quickly. You said you were a Baptist, but they do not believe in the baptism in Jesus' name.
Yes, we did.
No.
You're telling me, okay, this is a huge mistake here, Patrick, for you to tell me that I didn't believe the thing I'm fucking telling you I believed, the thing that is part of the doctrine.
Hey, you skipped right over my church.
You might be mistaken. What church did you go to, Eric?
I might be mistaken about what I believed? Are you kidding me?
Absolutely.
Hold on. So, do you understand
I'm done.
Do you understand what no true Scotsman is? Do you know what that argument is?
What? Can you repeat that, please?
No true Scotsman.
No true Scotsman. Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay, what is that?
That is when someone says that this is what somebody is, like a Scotsman pours sugar over his porridge or whatever the case may be, and then when somebody does not, they say no true Scotsman would do that. But the problem with that is that where is the mode of salvation found in the Bible? Salvation is found in Acts 2:38.
I didn't ask you anything about salvation. I asked you if you know what no true Scotsman is. And you tacked that on at the end. What you are saying is no true Christian. I don't care. Why do you think we would care about this minutia? Why?
Why not? Because it's very important. We're talking about salvation.
Okay, and you say that the Acts 2:38 one is there, and I'm talking about what Jesus said earlier. So why do you prioritize Paul? Why do you prioritize Paul over Jesus?
Okay, there are different dispensations. That was under the law. Jesus was under the law. We are now under grace after Jesus died. So now the new Acts 2:38 experience is the plan of salvation. Under the law, we had to offer up sacrifices. So when
you're not talking about the same thing I'm talking about. I asked why you prioritize Paul over Jesus.
They both said the same thing, but
no, they didn't.
Under different dispensations. Yes, they did.
No, and there's not different dispensations after Jesus. Jesus is the end of that. And if Jesus said something, are you saying that Paul can come along and change it?
No, I'm saying that.
Then why don't we stick with what Jesus supposedly said?
Sure, he said you must be born of the water and of the Spirit in John. I do believe John 3:5.
I understand that. And I also pointed out the other passage. So the thing is, the subject of what must I do to be saved is called soteriology. And it is the single point of contention between many different Christian denominations and doctrines.
Sure.
Okay? So what you're doing is calling in to say that you're right. And you called in to say that I don't know what I used to believe. And that I'm wrong about what Baptists believe. And so you are absolutely, as Eric pointed out, engaged in the no true Scotsman fallacy. And I don't give a rat's ass because what you called in to talk about was irrefutable evidence for the existence of God. And we have not heard that yet. Not about doctrine. We can argue different doctrines all day. It's probably better for you to go argue with other Christians. One of my favorite debates of all time was Matt Slick and Jesse, what's his name? Jesse, who sat around and quoted the Bible to each other for 30 minutes and never once came to agreement and never once exposed where the other one was wrong, which is why we have over 1,000 denominations that are Christian.
I know you have debated Matt Slick. He does not believe in Acts 2:38. I would be happy to.
I don't care what Matt Slick believes. Why can you not focus on the issue? What is the irrefutable evidence for God?
Okay, Acts 2:38. But let me ask you.
Holy shit, you're giving us blue balls, dude.
Can I?
Okay, so
Acts 2:38. Acts 2:38 is a passage in a book. It is not evidence for shit.
Okay, do you believe in evolution?
Oh, this is precious.
Oh, so here's what I believe. Yes, I accept that evolution by means of natural selection is the best explanation for the diversity of life on the planet.
Okay, and let me show you how there is no evidence for evolution. Darwinian evolution.
So you realize, of course, that we have DNA, and we've identified chromosome 2 in the fusing that shows common ancestry with other animals, and that the bulk of all biology, all actual science. Are you a scientist? Are you a biologist?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and I'm working on my Master's in Biomedical Sciences.
Sweet. So you're going to say there's no evidence for evolution?
Absolutely no evidence whatsoever.
Dinosaur fossils don't do it?
Yes.
Tiktaalik doesn't do it?
They tell you they're dead. Fossils tell you that they're dead.
Yes, and they're no longer here, and they also can tell you around what time frame they lived, and that allows you to make predictions about what you might find in other rock layers, like when we predicted to find Tiktaalik, and then we found it.
Let me ask you this. What is science? Science is something that we can test, demonstrate, or observe. When have we ever observed anything transferring or...
That's not what science is, and by the way, when it comes to...
Sure it is.
No, it's not. Science it comes from the word knowledge, essentially. But science is a collection of methods by which we come up with the best tentative conclusions about the way the world works. That's what science is.
Okay, does that include guessing?
Does it include guessing? Well, science is by definition an inferential process. Now, is there occasionally guessing involved? Is there guessing involved? Of course there is. There is supposition involved, which then goes out and gets tested and verified to the best of our ability, and then sent to peer review to make sure that we can confirm and repeat and attempt to falsify the findings. It's not just a guess, and therefore it is. And that has all been done. That has all been done. No.
Hold on.
No.
Go ahead.
Repeating something does not mean we have to recreate a dinosaur. Repeating the findings is about testing the accuracy of the findings, where we determine how old something is, where we determine whether or not two things are genetically similar enough to possibly have common ancestry. And then you build a model that explains the most facts and that does not include things that would disprove it. You said,
okay.
Now hang on. You said you had irrefutable evidence for God, and now you're claiming there is no evidence for evolution.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because those things are absolutely related. You said you have a degree in that? How did you get that? Did you go to upstairs college? Where did you go?
Well, let me ask you this.
What university do you go to?
What's that?
Were they single-celled organisms? The first organisms?
Were the single-celled organisms the first organisms?
The first organisms, yes.
Well, whether or not it qualified as a cell, I'm not completely sure. But what difference does it make? What difference does it make? No, stop. Stop. Here's the thing. I'm going to let you get to that. But when you say there's no evidence for evolution, and then you come up with questions or other things, how does that demonstrate that there's no evidence for evolution?
I'm showing you through the process of looking at the data.
No, you're not. You are cherry picking an example that you think you think disproves evolution, which is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God. It's irrelevant to whether or not you have irrefutable evidence for a God, and it's irrelevant to whether or not there's no evidence for evolution. You are cherry picking something out. Okay, ask me that.
Were the first organisms humans?
No.
Okay, so how did we get to humans? We don't have any evidence of how something can evolve into something from a single-celled organism into a multicellular organism. That is the proof that evolution is false, friends.
Thanks for calling.
Dear Diary, today Matt was more patient than me.
Not much.
This is a first. I would have hung up on him.
I did.
No, I would have hung up on him earlier. Well, I'm rubbing off on you.
Don't do that on the show. So here's the thing. This is why this is frustrating. First of all, neither of us are biologists. No. The truth of the model of evolution by means of natural selection is not why we're atheists.
No, it's not.
It's not. It is, however, the cornerstone of biology. So instead of calling a little atheist call-in show to disprove biology, you should probably go, I don't know, maybe talk to one of your professors since you're getting a degree in biology and have the debate with them on whether or not there's evidence for evolution. But the evidence for evolution is overwhelming. Evolution, by the way, is a fact, an observed fact that things change. The degree and extent and the method by which they change is where you get to the theory of evolution by means of natural selection.
Which makes it the best possible, it's the best solution that we have thus far.
Meanwhile, every single living thing that has ever existed is in fact a transitional form. I am, you are, my mom was. Individuals do not evolve and change in the biological sense. Populations do. Evolution is a change in allele frequencies over time. That happens. It's an undeniable, observed fact. What he was trying to get to was, we've never seen single cell life turn into multi-cell life. Okay, well, because you haven't seen it, does that mean it didn't happen?
And do you get to...
That's what inference is.
Well, and do you get to put your own personal crap into it?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is this has been around for so long. I remember my freshman year of high school, we were learning about evolution, and I stood up, and I had my God's not dead moment, and we started talking about it, and I said, well, I believe in God. And it was the most embarrassing. Now that I look back at that, I cringe.
You should.
Dude, it was horrible.
But
you
shouldn't cringe too much because you found your way out.
But yeah.
You were honest enough to address things honestly after you got over your exuberance.
Well, and I really thought that's just how it goes. But what I wound up learning, and really what I hope that he can take away from this, if anything.
He won't.
Well, just then those of you watching, the absence of evidence or trying to break down somebody else's evidence for their claim does not necessarily bolster yours. You actually need to provide evidence for your claim for us to be able to evaluate it.
Yeah, there was a path that call was going to take where I was going to say, okay, for the sake of this argument, we will say that we don't accept that evolution is real or true.
Yep.
How does that in any way prove you're God? Wait, it doesn't. Not one bit. But the reason I didn't go down that path is because if somebody calls to say they have irrefutable evidence for God, I already know quite a bit about how they think, because that's hyperbole. When they follow it up with there's no evidence for evolution, now they are on hyperbole squared, which should be a thing. Hyperbole and a half is a thing. But if you say that you have irrefutable evidence for the existence of God, and your irrefutable evidence is to say, or suggest, since he didn't quite get there, that some people have experienced being filled with the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues, therefore that's irrefutable evidence that God exists, you're just wrong. That is functionally identical to some people are convinced there's a God, therefore there is a God. That is a fallacy. That is not good reasoning. And that's why I didn't go down we'll throw evolution out and you still can't prove God. Because I want him to know he was wrong on both counts.
But that doesn't mean you're always wrong. It doesn't mean you always will be wrong. Study it, look it up, and don't just try and... Don't stick your head in the sand, dude.
He's right. It doesn't mean you'll always be wrong. But if you maintain hyperbolic, unsubstantiated positions like irrefutable evidence for God and no evidence for evolution, you are on a path to increase the likelihood that you will always be wrong.
At least about that.
About everything. You are increasing the likelihood, not saying you will in fact be wrong about everything, but you are increasing the likelihood that you will be wrong about everything. This is why I've said for years, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. This is why we advocate for skepticism and critical thinking. This is why we advocate for removing as much bias when analyzing logical arguments as possible. Because people think, what's the harm if I believe in God and don't believe in evolution? Well, the fact is, the harm is in your head, because some heuristic in your head led you to a conclusion that is not only not true, but in some cases demonstrably false. And that heuristic, that internal model that led you to evaluate evidence and reach the conclusion that you have irrefutable evidence for God or no evidence for evolution, that model is broken. It's as broken as faith, It is broken. It's probably more broken than guessing. And it doesn't just affect that one decision. Yep. Your beliefs don't live in your head as a vacuum, and the way you reach those beliefs can potentially impact other things. Because if you think a God is plausible, all of a sudden, talking snakes are possible.
You're using that
miraculous
same tool.
healing is possible.
Yeah, you're using that same tool in your toolbox. If you're pulling that tool out to understand the world, you're going to pull it out not just when it comes to religion, but those other things. So if you have a bad tool, expose it. Expose it.
Wait.
Matt, you perv.
Hey.
You know what? We could have
Stop exposing your bad tool. Look, they went straight to the FSM just in case you decided to expose your bad tool. Bad tool.
Yeah, No, I already accept I'm a tool. All right, let's go on.
All right, where do we want to go next?
I said let's go Ryan in Florida, number one.
Ryan it is. You are number one in Florida.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, what's up? All right. Well, I'm coming in with my hands up, so don't shoot.
Okay.
You guys pretty much bodied those other guys. I was kind of interested in the first caller. He kind of had my question answered, and my question was, what would convince you that God exists? And
I don't know.
I think you responded to him. Well, I think you responded to him, and correct me if I'm wrong, you responded to him by saying that it wouldn't matter if God existed or not. God could appear in front of me right now and says, I am God, would you praise or worship me?
No.
He said no.
No. I would believe, if a God appeared to me right now and demonstrated that he actually exists, I would, of course, believe that God exists, but that doesn't mean I'd worship it.
Separate things.
I believe Donald Trump is president, but I'm not fucking saluting him. Because I don't have to anymore. I'm no longer in the military. If I was in the military, I still would because it's required. But there's a different thing. There's what would convince you that God exists, and my answer is, I don't know. And the follow-up to that, of course, which everybody's heard probably 100 times at this point, is I don't know what it would take to convince me that God exists, but God should know, and God should be capable of doing it. And the fact that he hasn't means that he either doesn't exist or doesn't want me to know he exists right now. Either way, it's not my problem. But a God could exist and demonstrate that he exists, and I still wouldn't worship him.
Well, it's my position that it's not possible to prove to somebody that God exists. I think
So why would anybody believe if there's no way to demonstrate it? Why would you believe?
Right. Well, I mean, we can go there. I'm a Christian, and I believe the biblical God. I'm not in a denomination. I just go my foundation is the Bible.
So you believe in the God that supports slavery and misogyny and slaughtering off the Amalekites and everything else? Amalekites?
Yeah, that's the same God.
Yeah.
It's well, the way you're putting it is kind of disingenuous. It's
my aching ass! No. Let's not say that this is disingenuous. What's disingenuous is pretending that the God of the Bible is not in favor of slavery and misogyny
and genocide and incest.
Yeah. Well, there's specific rules about incest and who you can and can't sleep with. Father-daughter's evidently not off limits, but the rest of them are.
Hey, explain that to Lot and Moses.
Right.
Adam and Eve. Let's go to Nod.
Anyway. When you say something's disingenuous, in what way am I misrepresenting the God of the Bible?
Well, you're saying that God, like when you speak of slavery, you're talking about
Exodus 21.
Oh man,
well, I know what you're referring. I know what you're referring to.
Okay.
I'm well aware of those verses. But what I'm saying is, when you're referring to slavery, you're speaking about like the kind of we had 100 years ago in America.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about what's in Exodus. Is it more?
No, I know what's in Exodus 21.
I bet you don't.
Matt,
I bet you don't, or you wouldn't have called me. You wouldn't have called me disingenuous. Is it morally correct to own another person as property?
No, but
does the Bible allow people to own other people as property?
It does.
Then why? So you've just admitted the Bible advocates for something you view as immoral. How am I being disingenuous?
Well, it's the way, because I know the way you're looking at it, and I know the way in context.
I just told you. No. You don't get to pull some context bullshit. You just agreed with me. The Bible advocates.
Without context. Matt,
my point is,
context is important.
I agree with you. Context is critical.
Right.
I'm not wrong on the context. You just agreed with me. The Bible advocates for something immoral.
Right, but I was saying to because I know what you mean by slavery.
No, I'm talking about what the Bible means by slavery. That you shall buy your slaves you shall buy your slaves from the heathen that surround you. That they are your money and your property.
Calm down.
They are your money and your property that you can pass on to your children, and you can beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days. Where am I?
You could beat them.
He didn't stop talking.
Wait, did you say that doesn't say you can beat them?
Oh, you brought this up.
I thought you knew it. I thought you knew Exodus 21.
I know what verse you're talking about, but if you read that verse, it doesn't say that God said that you can do that. He's saying if this happens, this is what needs to be done.
Are you an idiot?
Say you can do.
Are you an idiot?
No.
I know you're not. I know you're not. This is what's so terribly embarrassing. This is what is absolutely frustrating to me. It's the reason why I bring up this all the time. Okay?
Right.
It says specifically, if someone beats his male or female servant and they die, that person is to be punished. But if they survive for a couple of days, that person is not to be punished. Is it moral?
Okay, but Matt,
is it moral?
Matt,
is it
stop right there,
fucking
Matt.
moral?
Calm down.
You stop, I'm talking. Is it moral to beat another human being as long as they don't die within a couple days?
I would say no. But
okay,
that's good.
What you just read. Are you saying that God commanded a man or told a man that he could beat his servant?
Are you saying that Exodus 21 is not from God?
No. I'm saying it's God inspired, but what I'm saying is, does it say that God said that you can do that, or does it say if this happens, this is what needs to be done?
Okay, so let me see if I can frame this a little differently. If we don't have a law, hang on. If we don't make a law, okay, that prohibits police brutality, but instead we say if a policeman beats a black man and he doesn't die within a couple days, he gets off. Is that moral?
I mean, that scripture also doesn't say that the person just gets off like that.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Oh my God!
Matt's looking this up while you talk. In the meantime, I got to ask you, man, how hard would it have been for God to have just prohibited it, to say thou shalt not own other people as property? How about other immoral things? What about spousal rape?
Here we go.
Why didn't God
an
care about
owner
that?
Who hits his male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free and compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out a tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free. It's not an eye for an eye when it comes to slaves. It's you must let them go free. It's a completely different set of justice. Right. If a man beats his slave and he doesn't die, he is not to be punished because the slave is his property. Exodus 21, 20. Not to be punished because he's his property.
Right, and so what I'm saying is that it doesn't imply that nothing exactly is going to happen to him because of that. It just says he's just not going to be responsible for the death of that person.
No, that's not what it says.
Individual could still.
That's not what it says.
It says. Right, he would not be punished for the death of that servant.
That's not what it says. It says he will be punished for the death of the servant. You can't even stay on what it actually says. If a man beats his slave and he dies, that man is to be punished. If the slave does not die within a day or two, that man is not to be punished because the slave is his property, his money. That's what it says.
Right.
And that is from God, at least God inspired is what's supposed to be the message here. It is, I swear, I'm not trying to be a dick, Ryan, but it breaks my heart in a serious way for people, anybody, to make excuses for something that they acknowledge plainly is grossly immoral, that has led to the subjugation of people for ages. I don't have to do shit. You want me to hang up?
Well,
I'm sitting here talking about... You're on hold. I'm sitting here explaining how I wake up every day, every single day, in a world where the majority of people believe in batshit crazy stuff that is also evil and contributes to the destruction of society. And when I talk to people who believe this, who want to talk about, oh, you're getting it out of context, you're just not considering that that's fucking bullshit. I read you the verses. When we're not looking at the verses, you don't necessarily get them right, but you agree that this is immoral, that people aren't property, that you shouldn't be allowed to beat them as long as they don't die, that you shouldn't be buying them from the people around you. And yet you are sitting here bending over backwards and accusing me of being disingenuous and taking it out of context in order to make excuses. Why not just acknowledge that book is grossly immoral and you and I are both better than that book? Why is that so hard? There are, by the way, Christians I've talked to who say, hey, those verses are immoral. I don't think those verses even necessarily came from a God. The God I believe in would not do that. The Bible is not de facto perfect. It is the result of men. Why not do that? And then you don't have to embarrass yourself and contribute to a culture that is amplifying immorality and pretending that it's moral, that it's permissible. Why not do that?
You're back on, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you're right. I did misspeak about the verse, but it's only because I'm trying to get in there, but you just keep jumping back in, and I'm trying to. Okay. I want to explain what's going on because again, context is important.
Can I ask you a question before you jump in with Matt, really quick?
All right, go ahead, man.
Just really quick, do you recognize that you're trying to justify slavery? Like, is that something that you recognize right now? And you could quibble about definitions, and that's fine, but you do realize you're justifying slavery right now.
Though. I mean, you guys keep saying, well, you could say definitions, you could say
no.
But that's bullshit.
That's because that this was a quick question because you're talking about. I just wanted to ask, do you even recognize it?
Okay, slavery. There was slavery back in those days, but what in Israel, the whole servant thing is not like the slave trade that was going on back in those days. Now, even though the guy did beat his servant, and if he lives, but he still has to go in front of the judges after that. I mean, as you read in the verses besides that, if he harms his servant, he's to be let go free. I mean, back in those days when somebody was a servant, like when people would be servants for a certain amount of years to pay off a debt. No,
Ryan, no.
Indentured
servitude is already immoral, and slaves didn't necessarily have rights, but that's not what we're talking about here. Let me cut to the chase. Ryan, would you be my slave under the rules established in Exodus 21?
If I could be, see, you keep saying slave, but it doesn't say slave; it says servant.
Oh my God, Ryan, would you be my servant under the rules of Exodus? No, shut up. Would you be my servant under the rules of Exodus 21?
It's a bad idea. Don't do it.
Why does this take even half a fucking second? This is the embarrassing thing. I'm gonna let you go, Ryan. I've already hung up because I want you to go and think about this. I'm not joking when I talk about how much this breaks my fucking heart to watch the poison that religion has imbued people with to the point where they will bend over backwards and hem and haw about the easiest question I could ask. Are people property? Can you beat them? Would you be my slave, my servant, if you want to pedantically? It wasn't written in English anyway. Under what Exodus 21 says. It is grossly immoral. It is an embarrassment that anybody would pause for more than half a second to answer that question. Think about what your religion has done to your head. It is making you a slave to the religion because you no longer have the free will and exercise to say, this is wrong. I don't understand how things that are obviously wrong, just because they're in somebody's book, you got to bend over backwards. Well, you got to think about the times. And it wasn't like, 150 years ago. It was, way back in the Israelites, and there were people who owed debts. Yes, and there were completely different rules for how to let your Jewish slaves go after 7 years, and then how you could trick fuck them into being your slaves forever, and how every 50 years was a year of Jubilee, and everybody got to go free. 50 years. 50 years. So when I buy a slave at 8, when they're 58, I can let them go. Oh, but Matt, what if the 50 years falls on their 10th birthday? You only had them for 2. Great, I don't buy an 8-year-old. I wait 2 years, and I buy the 11-year-old, and I get him for 49 years. There is literally no way to make what that book says about slavery remotely moral. And it's I tell you what, because I talk about this all the time, it's the prime example. It's the one I think is most obvious to people, that most people get. And I trust that Ryan will actually get it too. I don't know what he'll end up doing about it. I don't know what anybody will end up doing about it. But for the people who are like, oh, Matt just keeps harping on slavery. Yes! If you had a book that said it's okay to cut off your daughter's hand, what excuses would you make for that? And I would argue that cutting off somebody's hand is probably less harmful to them overall than maintaining them as a slave that you can beat and punish and sell off and give to your kids as their inheritance. I can live without a hand. I can't live without freedom. I can't live a good, moral, humanist, valuable life without that freedom. And the people who are willing to sacrifice basic freedoms, actually they're not. Because Ryan knows that there's no way he would ever be my servant under Exodus 21. What's actually going on in Ryan's head is, I can't say that because that would be me denying and denouncing the Bible. And my religious beliefs won't allow me to do that. That is the poison that religion imbues the population with, and it has to stop. I would love to never bring up Exodus 21 again forever. If the Christian community and the Jewish community would just get together and say, this is fucking wrong, we're going to at least ignore this passage in Exodus. You also have to ignore the one in Leviticus and the one in Deuteronomy, and the fact that in the New Testament, Jesus never says anything against slavery, and the only thing Paul ever says is slaves obey your masters in the Lord, even the cruel ones, which is the exact wrong thing to say to anybody. There's a reason slavery comes up over and over and over and over again, because it should be as obvious as whether or not the sun goes around the earth now that you actually have the evidence for it. I fucking hate it.
Damn, dude. All right.
Who are we going to talk to
next? Round of applause for that. Holy crap.
Who are we going to talk to next?
Let's go for some more evidence for God.
Okay.
Dave, number one.
Number one. Hi, Dave from Missouri. Welcome back. Dave?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on with Eric and Matt.
Hello.
Matt's taking a moment.
He needs a moment. What's up, man? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, is this Eric I'm talking to?
This is.
Eric, hey, I was speaking to you earlier, I think.
Yeah.
They told me to call back.
Oh, right. You wanted to talk to his supervisor?
Well, I guess I can but you said he's taking a moment.
Well, let's.
I'm technically not Eric's supervisor.
Yes, no, I need this in my life.
I'm just the host for the show, but I'm moderately supervising.
Yeah,
What's up?
For those of you who were not there for Talk Heathen, number one, shame on you. Number two, let's bring you up to speed. David was unhappy with his call to Talk Heathen and called back and said, I need to speak to his supervisor. Dave has happily been on hold so that he can complain to Eric's supervisor. Eric will play the role of the chastised employee. Matt, go on.
What's up? What's up, Dave?
Wow, isn't it great? Live in a country where you can offend so many people.
Yes.
Isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Okay, well, if you can dish it out, I hope you can take just a little bit, can't you? A little spoonful back in your direction.
Do you think we're dishing it out because we haven't been able to take it?
Well, you hang up on an awful lot of people before they get to make
I do hang up, but that has nothing to do with whether or not I'm offended.
Okay.
I hung up on Ryan,
You sound offended.
Out of what could be viewed as offense. But the offense there is against reason, not against me. The offense there is against morality.
I understand that.
Okay.
I listened. I was on hold the whole time listening to this whole show.
Okay.
And I think I got real good insight as to what drives your passion here, why you do your show.
Cool.
So it was very insightful.
Why is that?
Well, it was just very insightful for me personally. You absolutely hate religion. Hate it.
I hate what some religions do. I don't hate all religious views. There are plenty of things, for example, even within Christianity, that I don't hate. Notions of forgiveness and charity and things like that.
Sure, the things like you said earlier when you were, and I agreed with a lot of things you were saying, waking up in a world with all this crazy stuff going on and all the injustices and the immoral things that have occurred over the history of humanity and continue to this day. And some of it under the name and the banner of religion. Yeah,
but I don't do this because I hate religion. I do this because I love humanity and reason. And the things that stand in the face and fly in the face of humanity and freedom and reason are objectionable.
I understand.
Okay.
Hey, I get as angry with God as I think you do sometimes.
I'm not angry with God. God's not real.
Well, you don't believe in Him.
Correct.
So but I do, and so therefore, sometimes I get upset, and I don't understand why He allows and has allowed certain behaviors.
Yeah.
And things to happen in this world.
So what do you do about that, Dave? When you don't understand why God does things, what do you do about it? Do you ask God?
Absolutely, yeah.
What's He say?
Oh, my God, every single time it's the same answer.
Nothing? Because that's the answer that most people seem to get.
No. The answer is there was a war in heaven once upon a time. Not going to have another war in heaven again. This is your test. The teacher is silent during the test. Your entire life is a test.
So you hear this answer, like audibly, or just feel it, or what?
Not like you speaking to me. Not like you speaking to me. No.
Okay. How do you know?
Voice. I don't hear. No voice comes to me and says nothing.
How do you know that the answer that you think you got is actually the answer?
Well, because I was trying to explain earlier to Eric before he hung up on me a couple hours ago. I was trying to make the point about some evidence proving the existence of God.
Cool.
And the evidence that I, and again, I guess the reason I got so offended was because for 30 years, it took me 30 years to find this because of all the idiots.
It took me almost that long to find my way out.
And I understand. And it's...
But what's the evidence?
Well, the evidence, very simply, just like, just so we can, I just want to make sure that in our mindsets here, we can agree on what actual evidence is. Now, I'm going to be using...
I bet we don't.
He's going to do a courtroom.
That's why I'm asking you the question.
And then he's not
believe the Alamo.
Hang on,
You believe the events. You believe the events of the Alamo took place, correct?
I just remembered something.
The Alamo? Which events?
Yeah, the Alamo.
Which events?
The event, the 13-day siege of the Alamo. You believe that happened, right?
I have no idea. I accept that this is the story and that it's likely true.
Based on testimonial evidence?
Sure. Because there's so the nature of the claim determines what sort of evidence would be needed for it. If somebody tells me they have a pet dog, I'm going to take them at their word. If they say they have an invisible pet dragon, I'm not. If somebody says a battle took place at the Alamo where people died and there was a siege for 12, 13 days, whatever it was, I'm going to accept that because there's nothing remotely extraordinary about that as far as nature is concerned. If somebody says that spaceships came down to the Alamo and abducted those people and took them to safety, I'm not going to take them at their word. The nature of the claim determines what sort of evidence would be required before it's reasonable to accept it.
Okay. Well, to date, most people can only explain their belief in God by using what we refer to as that testimonial evidence type of stuff.
Yeah, and that's why there's no evidence for God.
Right. And so from your earlier conversation you were having with the gentleman, you have a little bit of knowledge in regards to the Bible and what it says. And what it claims?
A little bit.
You have a pretty decent understanding. You would say
it's passable. I don't spend as much time with it as I used to. Obviously, when I was going to become a preacher.
Okay. Well, then when you were studying to become a preacher, maybe you're aware of the over 1,700 prophecies that the Bible.
I'm aware that there's a claim about mountains and mountains of prophecies, but there are literally zero that there are literally zero that anybody can confirm where a prophecy.
Hundreds have been confirmed.
Oh my God! Am I going to finish my sentence? I let you talk. So, in order for a prophet, oh my God!
That's exactly what happened. So I said no, and he barreled through and started talking over. Yes, the prophecies, and I just click.
Yeah, here's the thing: is prophecy is really easy. As someone who's a stage magician and mentalist on occasion, I can make predictions that apparently come true, and I can also apparently read people's minds and other things like that. I can't really do any of that, but in order for a prophecy to be even considered to be a prophecy and a fulfilled prophecy, there needs to be a prediction made, answerable by a single set of circumstances, so it's not subject to interpretation, within a defined time frame. If I say the United States is going to elect a woman as president, and I don't put any time frame on it, and eventually we get a woman as president, that's not fulfilled prophecy. When I tell the waiter I want my steak medium rare, because I like meat, and then my steak shows up medium rare, that's not fulfilled prophecy. When somebody says Jerusalem will become a state, and then there's an issue about potential statehood for Jerusalem, that's not a fulfilled prophecy. When people are actively, if I say people are going to name their kids Matt is awesome, and somebody does, they're not fulfilling prophecy. They're just doing what I told them to do. So the claims of prophecy in the Bible that are supposedly the ones that come true are the ones that are also where the only evidence for any sort of claim coming true is also in the Bible. And the prophecies, the 1,700, which is an absolutely ridiculous asinine number that only like King James Version only 1611 AV folks are going to advocate for, those aren't even all prophecies. This is somebody finding out a fact and then going back and reading a passage to see if they can interpret it in a way such that it serves as a prophecy for the fact, in the same way that people claim Nostradamus made all sorts of predictions. It's not a thing.
Yeah, that was the point that I was going to make. Is you were being really charitable for a little while there, because a lot of those prophecies, just in the way that they're written, were written after the fact that it had gotten done. So it would be exactly the same as you and I writing down that 9/11 is going to happen. Ooh, it already happened. Why is that phenomenal?
There are definitely ridiculous. Some where the most reasonable explanation is that the prophecy was made after the fact. There are others where it just wasn't intended
there are a bunch
to be a prophecy.
Of them. Yeah.
There's also the ones where this isn't a prophecy because people are actively working to fulfill it. At no point. So let's say I'm having a conversation with somebody, and I write down a prediction to Eric to say, I'm going to hang up on this guy. And then I do. Did I fulfill prophecy? No. If I tell Eric, I think this person's going to make a no true Scotsman fallacy, or actually Eric tells me that beforehand and the person does, is that fulfilled prophecy? Did Eric make a prediction? Well, no, it's
bow before me.
Hardly extraordinary that we would hear certain things from callers and know exactly where they're going, especially after having done this for so long. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that there are, in fact, 1,700 prophetic claims that have all come true. The next question is, how did that happen? Your conclusion, and I apologize because you're no longer on the line, but your conclusion is, God is the only explanation for how 1,700 prophecies could potentially come true. How'd you rule out accident? How'd you rule out time machine? How did you rule out aliens? How did you rule out fiction? How did you rule out post-predicting or post-dicting? How did you rule all those out? And even if you rule everything else out except God, everything you're aware of except God, That's still not evidence for God. That is, by definition, an argument from personal incredulity or argument from ignorance fallacy. You can't show me any other way that these predictions could have come true other than God. You're correct. I can't show you any other way that all those predictions could have come true except for God. I also can't show you that it was God, and neither can you, and that's the point. Inferring that there's some supernatural cause does not mean there is. That's just the point where your imagination ran out and your frustration with being willing to say, I don't know what the explanation is, also ran out. That's the two most deadly things that can happen when you're exploring something, is when you run out of ideas and are willing to accept anything rather than acknowledge that the right answer is, I don't fucking know. When you get more comfortable with those two things, all of a sudden you stop reaching the conclusion, God did it. Magic Man done it. It's the doctor. He went back in time, inspired those people to write those predictions because he knew what was going to happen. Oh, Matt, you're being so silly. Why would you bring up, Doctor Who and sci-fi and everything? How is that any less silly? All right, time travel may in fact be impossible, whereas the supernatural we can't show is impossible. So maybe it is more silly.
Dude, that is above my pay grade, that piece.
Me too.
But I'm sorry, I'm just watching the live chat and all of the different prophecies that are being written about you and I right now. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Are we going to do it? Is that a prophecy yet?
We'll be in a second.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
Because we're not. Anyway, where are we going next?
He's got to play his cards right. Let's go with Brandon in Arizona.
Brandon in Arizona. Welcome to the Hang Up Show.
Cut this sexual tension.
Yeah, you've hung up on me before, Matt.
Oh.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
I tell you what then, to be fair, since I've done all the hanging up and I've hung up on me before, I won't hang up on you. I will let you hang up, or Eric will hang up on you.
I have the button.
Sure.
I'm not afraid to use it.
So anyway, what's up? Let's see if we can go a little lighter.
One thing that drives me a little bit, gets me aggravated sometimes is, I know your view on, the Bible condoning slavery and everything, but I just want you to go back to Genesis with Joseph. When Joseph saved everybody from 7 years of famine, that's when all of the Egyptians and the Hebrews sold themselves as property and that's what put the Hebrew children into bondage, which you consider slavery. Bondage and slavery are two different words. That's why in the King James Bible, the word slave occurs one time and the word slavery occurs one time.
In English.
In the entire Bible.
In English, and also there's no evidence that Jewish enslavement in Egypt ever occured.
I've never gotten a pleading look from Matt.
Well, there's a documentary you should check out on the what's it called? It's the Evidence for Exodus.
Yeah, there's a book.
Check that out.
There's a book that you should check out that also goes through this, because the sort of evidence that would confirm that Jews were enslaved in Egypt does not exist. There is not commonality in culture, in language.
They found Joseph's tomb.
Oh my God!
They sure did.
Okay.
That's why they watched
yeah,
that.
they did.
No! Stop! How do you know it's Joseph's tomb?
Well, it's actually not like it's a monument it's like a monumental tomb of Joseph.
How do you know?
Because it has Hebrew clothing on it, and the Egyptians made sure that everybody identified that this specific leader of the Egyptian people was a Hebrew.
I thought Moses was the leader while they were in Egypt.
But we're talking about because Joseph was a leader in Egypt. He was right under Pharaoh, if you recall, in Genesis.
Okay.
So, but this is how, the Bible never, ever condones slavery. In fact, man-stealers are put to death.
You bastard! Come on!
No.
Oh.
No, we've done slavery today, and you're not going to come on here and say the Bible never condones it, and then go to the man-stealing verse. Because man-stealing is illegal, and that means you can't steal somebody else's fucking slaves. I swear.
Okay.
Just
Drake in
read
Florida?
some other fucking book other than the Bible. Read any book other than the Bible. I've read a book.
Drake.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Drake, I am pinning my hopes on you.
Wait, I was in a good mood when
we're gonna have a pleasant hang up at the end of this, and this is gonna be good.
You're not gonna hang up on me. We're gonna say
right.
goodbye.
Right.
Goodbye.
No. Yeah, no.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I want to pause for a second, Drake, because I really feel like I need to explain this. Legitimately,
your conversation before.
Legitimately, I'm in a good mood today. I know it doesn't necessarily appear so, because.
Well, I've watched dozens of your shows. I binge watched them over the past couple of weeks. I kind of got a feel for your mood.
Dang.
I didn't mean that as an insult.
No. I didn't take it as an insult. It's.
Good.
I'm just saying, for the people who are like, Matt's all extra crusty today.
Fired up.
It's. I'm open to having anybody. If somebody, we had mountains of calls here that said they had evidence for God. Mm-hmm. Exactly how many, and some of those who called in to say they had evidence for God acknowledged, well, you can't prove God.
No, you can't.
How is that irrefutable?
I mean,
and when somebody finally said that,
miracles that Jesus Christ did, and say a rational explanation for every one of them.
Yeah.
He had learned how to remove cataracts from an eye, and that solved blindness.
So
he set the leg of a broken boy's leg.
Oh, you are
helped him walk again.
No, you're doing the same thing.
Medicine.
You're doing the same thing that Ryan.
I'm saying that Jesus Christ exists. I'm saying there's an explanation, a rational explanation for the crazy miracles that religious people believe.
No, stop. You're doing the same thing that Ryan did, trying to make excuses for something. This is like the people who stop.
I was trying to
Drake.
Okay.
This is exactly like the people who say, the Bible says Jesus walked on water. Let's see if we can come up with a rational explanation for it. Well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But the real question is, did Jesus fucking walk on water? Why would you spend a bunch of time? Stop.
No.
Stop.
Sorry, I'm agreeing with you. He did not walk on water.
But you were talking about... You were talking about rational explanations for the removal of cataracts or setting a leg. When we have no reason to think any of those things actually happened, you're trying to find a rational explanation for claims of miracles when we have no evidence that the miracles occurred. So it doesn't matter.
You're being very, very nice right now, Drake. You're being very positive, and you're trying to give the benefit of the doubt to Jesus. But I think the Bible is supposed to stand on its own, and that's why we're so upset. But regardless, you have just been impromptu put as in the position of Matt and my therapist after this last couple of calls, and that's not fair to you. You called in for a reason. What would you like to talk about?
I studied psychology all my life, so...
See, look at that.
I want to talk about cult deprogramming.
You want to talk about cult deprogramming? Why do you want to talk about cult deprogramming?
Okay, well, I was oppressed socially throughout my childhood, and anytime I had a medical issue, it was never a rational discourse. It was always aggression.
Okay.
And so now as an adult, speaking with my doctors at the VA, I have a really difficult time engaging them. One doctor challenged something I said about my ribs and threw the floating ribs in my face. And the first thought that came to my mind was, I know that Adam and Eve, or Eve was born because of a rib that Adam shared with her. That was the first thought in my head. Not a rational, I understand that there's floating ribs, and I've studied medicine, which is also true. I couldn't believe it. In my own mind, I felt that. That's what came up.
I have a question.
Even though I know, yeah.
You said your doctor challenged you on something about your ribs, and then you said floating rib? I don't know what you're talking about.
The detached ribs at the bottom of your rib cage, I have damage to mine, and it's very difficult to breathe sometimes.
Oh, okay.
And I was trying to explain that to my doctor, and she was pissed off because I wasn't abiding by the schedule rules of the VA and going through the channels, the proper channels. I was trying to open discourse, and it was a cross paths, and a dead end. Does that make any sense?
The reason he's bringing it up is because he's thinking about the indoctrination, wherein he still thinks about his ribs as
I got that.
All right.
And it upset me to know that, because I'm a rational person and I don't just jump to emotional defense of myself, and I don't just, but I was being aggressed upon emotionally, and that's what came surface in my subconscious mind. I didn't say it.
A side question about the ribs, because this pops into my head so first of all, when you talk about ribs, I also think of Adam and Eve, but in a slightly different way now. Because when I yell at people, because let's be honest, I was fucking yelling a minute ago. When I yell at people to read some other book other than the Bible and to explore actual science, there's a prime example with the Adam and Eve story that has stuck in my mind for 20 some odd years at least. Because like many people, I was taught that men have one more rib than women. And when you think about it, even if you don't believe the Bible literally, you could hear that.
Isn't it the other way around, though?
You could hear. No, it's not. Okay.
I thought.
No, hang on.
Sorry.
You could hear something about there being a difference in the number of ribs that men and women have, and even as a secularist, you could say, "Oh, that explains why they wrote this story of God taking a rib from Adam and making Eve, because that explains the fact that we have a different number of ribs." The problem is we don't have a different number of ribs. We're humans. There's not something about an XX chromosome or XY or anything else. It changes the number. And the funny thing is, you can actually count them on your own. You can touch yourself, and maybe you can find somebody else that will let you touch them. But if not, you can go to a museum and look at the skeletons. And you could look at every episode of CSI where they're trying to figure out whether or not the victim that's been in a barrel for 30 years is a male or a female. They don't count ribs.
No.
They look at the pelvic bone. They look at things like that are morphologically different. And yet countless people, even people still today, have still bought into this notion that either men or women, one, no matter which direction you want to go, depending on how you heard the story, one of them's got more ribs than the other. And nobody bothers to check. It's just like, isn't God wonderful? Isn't God wonderful? He took one of Adam's ribs, and now we all have proof right here. I can touch. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And wouldn't that make Eve a clone?
Ooh.
Yeah. But a magical clone. So with magical clones, you can do whatever you want. It also means that Jesus must have been female, because that would essentially be parthenogenesis of Mary becoming pregnant without, actually having intercourse.
What do you think about Jesus being twins?
Okay, I feel like we have gone down a really weird path.
Yeah.
Let's just.
But it's better than slavery.
I know I got you, Matt. You wanted.
So how can we actually help, Drake? Yeah. You wanted.
What's that?
You wanted to talk about cults. And you wanted to talk about deprogramming from cults. Was it more about just kind of getting away from indoctrination that you kind of, it seems like instead of talking about cults, you really wanted to talk about indoctrination?
Perhaps. Maybe I was just really excited about calling you guys and flying on the energy pattern of it.
That's all right. So I would love to share just a little bit about that with you if you'd like, if it helps.
Please, I'm a good listener.
I can tell. Drake, when it comes to getting through indoctrination, it can take a lifetime. And it's something that we all who've gone through this have to try and get our way through. I've talked to people here at the ACA who come in who say that they've walked away from their church, but they still have hell dreams for years. This is a post-traumatic stress. When you're telling children that they're going to suffer in pain and torment, it fucking sticks with you, dude.
Yeah, or even worse when you tell them that they can't do anything about the evils of the world when there are very simple things you can do.
I mean, that
discourse.
Yeah, and it's something that people really don't recognize that never were in the church.
Resolution.
And when you weren't in the church, you don't know what it's like being a teenager and hating yourself for having sexual urges and trying to talk to and have other people be accountable because you are suffering from your sin and it's going to send you to hell.
Oh yeah, it's a nightmare trying to be chaste when you're going through
puberty
urges.
It's horrendous, and what it does is it weaponizes shame. If you want to talk about indoctrination, then I want to, if anything, get out on the board that you are not suffering alone. That it's something that all of us are going through to some degree, and that we're doing our best. But when we're having this fight, it's not just about slavery. I mean, that's a big one. There are lots of things, but we're also trying to create a world where we're not sticking that pain on the next generation.
By the way, Drake,
it's not fair.
Would you be my servant under the rules in Exodus 21?
Oh, sweet
Stop.
Jesus!
Hell no. And would I would never invite anybody else to be my servant either. And
exactly. And this is.
I'm such a gentle person that when someone says I'm hurting them, I instantly second guess my own behavior instead of turning on them and saying, "Oh, you're full of it."
This is the reason I asked the question. It wasn't just to do a callback. It wasn't to get me all riled up. It was because I suspected that you would respond immediately with no. And the reason this point is important for you is what Eric was talking about. Shame and indoctrination specifically is what gets to people to the point where they are willing to sacrifice their own humanity in deference to a book that they know to be immoral. And no matter how much you feel you're dealing with the indoctrination and the shame and guilt and all these other things, you are already in a better position than some other people because you are recognizing that you need to decide what your boundaries are and that you're not going to be a victim to indoctrination and shame. You answered quickly and easily to an obvious question. And yet people who are indoctrinated the same way you were will hem and haw and make excuses. So I just wanted you to know you're already in a better position than many of the other people who've been indoctrinated, and that there is a way out and that there is a way that things can get better. Eric and I were both indoctrinated. I would have made all kinds of excuses at some point for almost anything bad in the Bible, and now I don't.
And when we look back at that, I was just talking about feeling cringe earlier for doing something in my childhood, but I look forward and I talk to these people who tell me that they're ashamed that they haven't moved past their trauma soon enough, as if that's something that you have to get over right away.
They take forever.
No, we're fucking humans. It can take a lifetime, and that's not something to be ashamed of, and you are making progress towards it.
Yep.
Yeah. And one other thing, I'm sorry, but I'm looking in the live chat, and something really pissed me off. So I've got to get it out, and that is, oh, well, Eric was trying to say something nice, and then he painted a hellish picture, so now it's not nice. No, it's not nice. But it's better to face what reality is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's better to face the reality than live a lie. And that's why we're here. And no, it doesn't help when you paint a rosy picture of the what we have to go through. It's better to actually recognize it and see that in each other so that we can get through it than have to deal with that shit feeling like you're alone.
We live in a culture that's...
Suppressing it and suppressing it, not even communicating about it, that's not the right path to go.
Yeah, we live in a culture that stigmatizes and shames people for mental health issues.
Yes, I know.
People don't tend to stigmatize me or shame me for athlete's foot or diabetes. But we do it.
When you're sad, that's mental health, right?
Well, I mean, I've talked about my mental health issues.
The study of human beings.
Yeah. I've talked about my mental health issues on the show and on my show on Talk Heathen, and I've gotten emails that day. Well, that's why you're an atheist. Your brain is broken. There's something fundamentally wrong with you. You need God. That'll heal you. And
that's horrible.
It's horrible from this end.
And what's
but for those of us who've come from it, they actually feel like that's the right thing to do. They're trying what they think is the best. They're using the tools that they think. The thing is, they're bringing leeches instead of medicine. Yeah. We actually have to fucking update our tools.
This is the thing that I was talking about earlier.
Culture or not mental health.
If
medicine.
Right. And they have this notion, and by the way, it's not just mental health issues. Oh, you're not sick, you're sad. Well, bite me. But the other aspect of this is that we're just barely beyond the stage where people are blaming demons for it. And we're not too far beyond it because I have relatives who, when somebody gets cancer or has something bad happen to them, that's God punishing them. That's Satan trying to exploit them for doing the right thing for Jesus. It goes absolutely both ways. The entire world is wrapped in this notion that there's a spiritual warfare going on. And so when something bad happens to you, either you deserved it or Satan is coming after you because you're doing the right thing for Jesus. And if you have mental health problems, you should just put your big boy or big girl panties on and get over it because that's not a real illness. This is the type of world that we're living in. And when Hitchens wrote Religion Poisons Everything,
yes,
that was only barely hyperbole. And the only reason it's barely hyperbole is because we managed to keep religion out of a couple of things. Maybe a couple of things.
And it's only because we're not doing a very good job of it.
Yeah, we have to be vigilant. You can lose everything to where this foundational idea of a God and religion and supernatural takes over everything.
Oh, yeah. I have tried to focus my life and be a productive human being and shoot for the stars. And every time I do, and I come near my family, I just get totally dragged right down into it, and I end up becoming a silent, obedient, still person who doesn't have any energy whatsoever. And it frightens me to be trapped in that over and over and over again. Yeah. To never be allowed to have my own free will and speak my own consciousness, face issues, genuinely face them, and resolve them. You know,
so I tell
everything is actually easier to resolve than people make it out to be.
The call screener
conflict is so easy.
The call screener's got you listed as a theist, and I normally we would dig in on that, and I'm not going to. What I'm going to say is, no matter where you are in your beliefs or anything else, you might want to look into the Secular Therapist Project. Even as a theist, or even as somebody who's perhaps not secular, there's still absolutely nothing wrong with getting a secular therapist, because at least then you're getting sound scientific treatment without the mumbo jumbo of somebody else's religious views. That is something that would be, actually worth looking into.
I'll definitely do that.
Hey,
cool.
If
go ahead.
Yeah. No, if there's anything to take away from this that I can give, it's that I'm seeing people who are feeling less alone in the live chat right now from this conversation. So if you want to know if you are doing something good, then maybe having this conversation
on listeners.
We,
I should say, not I.
Well, we are, because we should be talking about it. And
I want to thank you so much. There's so many things that you've given me, so many phrases and expressions that you've given me that I can be armed to defend myself with, that I couldn't come up with or rationalize on my own, and that's been very helpful.
I want to throw one last wrench. I want to throw one last wrench into this before we send you off, because we've got two more callers to get to.
Okay.
When you say the words "defend yourself," I have an involuntary reaction, and I just want to make it clear: you don't have to defend yourself to anybody ever. Nobody owes anybody else an explanation for who they are, what they think, or anything else. It is that very mentality that is part of the indoctrination, part of the you are less than, part of the you are inferior, that you owe somebody an explanation for who you are, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be Christian, atheist, whatever, whether it be a Red Sox fan. You don't owe anybody an explanation for shit. And anybody who's going to try to put the onus on you to defend yourself, cut them from your life if they don't stop.
Yeah, that's something that I've been relatively successful at doing, ending relationships really easily. But there are some key relationships, the close ones.
I'm pretty good at ending relationships too, but
that's kind of where the work starts, because we've got to create community for each other, and we're doing it. But we've got to move on to the next caller, Drake.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye.
Have a wonderful day.
Because we said we'd say goodbye.
Right?
Yes.
Prophecy.
I can't. You pick. We have two left.
Adrian in Texas.
Where in Texas, Adrian?
Hello. Hi.
Hey, whereabouts in Texas?
I am in.
The call is coming from within the house. No, sorry. Where are you calling from?
It broke up. We couldn't hear you.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, Central Texas.
Okay.
Well, we're in Central Texas.
Anyway, what did you call about?
I just wanted to call about what I believe and why.
Cool.
I believe in a creator God, and I believe because of the evidence that was left behind, like DNA and the moon and the tilt of the earth, and the distance from the sun and the position of Jupiter and the magnetic field and the ozone layer and the plate tectonics.
I'm getting deja vu.
20,
Did you call Talk Heathen earlier?
Animals also, not to mention.
Adrian, did you call Talk Heathen earlier?
Yes, but I didn't know that Matt was going to be on today, and I really wanted to talk to him.
Okay, so you listed off all kinds of things that you think point to a creator. Pick one.
Right. We could start with, there's a lot of them, but we could start with DNA.
Okay, DNA is naturally occurring. It's a self-replicating molecule. Why on earth would we reach a conclusion that it requires a creator?
Right, because of experts like Richard Dawkins, who say that it gives the appearance of design, but that that they don't know how it came about.
Okay, so as somebody who knows Richard and has been on stage with Richard, and as he's one of the most preeminent scientists and atheists on the planet, if you're going to cite Richard Dawkins to talk about how he says that DNA gives the appearance of design, wouldn't it also be fair to say that Richard's conclusion is that there's not an intelligent designer behind it?
Oh, no. I think his conclusion is that he doesn't know, and that nobody else does either, but that he doesn't know why it looks designed.
Okay, so one of the things is that the appearance of design is about how we observe things. It's not about how they are. Just like the appearance of a face is not how things are, that's how we observe it. We are a problem-solving, world-discovering brain that is keyed to see faces and hear voices and recognize design, and we are intention-seeking brains. And so when you see something like DNA that's self-replicating, if you know nothing else about it and you don't know how it might work or anything else, then you'd have to say, wow, I don't really know how this came about. But the fact that you say we don't know means you cannot then conclude, therefore there's a designer. The answer stops at I don't know until such time as you do.
Right. They don't know why it looks to be designed.
No, they don't know. I don't know. You don't know. And so when you say the experts don't know how DNA came about, but I think it was God, you're not.
That's just one of the options.
It's not an option.
Just one of the options.
It's not an option.
God or no God. I learned that from you.
No. No, you didn't.
Yeah, Dad.
God or no God?
Either there's a God or there's not. That is a fact. But that does not mean that you get to include God as one of the potential explanations. Because what if there's no God? Then you've included a potential explanation that isn't a potential explanation. So until such time as you know whether or not something, a God, is an explanation, you don't get to include it in the candidate explanations. When we look around and we say, why did this tree grow at a particular angle? We can investigate, but if, let's say we look at that tree for ages and we never come up with an explanation for why that tree grew at an angle, does that mean somebody's justified in saying, well, God wanted it to grow at that angle?
No, I think you're...
That's exactly what you're doing with DNA.
Because
that is exactly what you're doing with DNA.
No, because the sideways tree growing is just one thing that you would have to look at to say that maybe this was God or something. But I'm saying there's a bunch of things like...
No, it's a direct analogy. The tree, there's some explanation for why the tree grew at an angle. There's some explanation for the formation of DNA. If the answer to the tree is, I don't know, and if the answer is, and if you say, I don't know, it's then unjustified to say God wanted the tree to grow that way. That is true for the DNA as well. And the fact that you pointed to DNA and axial tilt and countless other things, you can do that for each one of them. But the plural of anecdote is not data. And the plural of guessing is not fact. And the plural of inference is not deduction. So the fact that you come up with 20 things for which the correct answer is I don't know, but you suppose a God could be a candidate explanation, doesn't mean you have 20 points of evidence for God. You still have 0.
Yeah, that's just, God is just one of the options. There's the other option is nature.
Prove it. Prove that God is an option.
It's either God or no God, right?
Correct, and I'm going to go with no God. Now, if you want to prove that God is an option, you have to prove that God is an option. You don't get to say, well, either there's a God or there's not. How is that proof that God is an option?
Well, that's kind of circular, isn't it? I mean, how could I prove God before I prove God? I mean, I can use the courtroom analogy. So it's like when the experts are saying that, it's like a medical examiner saying that, that this looks like foul play, but the medical examiner, he can't tell you who the murderer is. He could just tell you that this looks like murder, and that's all I'm saying.
No, do you know why? Because medical examiners spend their time studying human beings and how human beings live and die. And they have mountains of evidence so that if we find my body in my living room with a hole in my head and a bullet on the other side of the floor and no gun in the room, that is all evidence that I was likely murdered. And the reason they can reach that conclusion is because we know about murder, we know about guns, we demonstrated all of these things are real. They are actual, demonstrable, viable candidates. If we find my body in the living room with a hole in my head, does God did it become a possible explanation?
Well, if we find...
Does God did it become a possible explanation just because you don't know who did it?
Well, I thought we were going with...
Does God did it become a possible explanation just because you don't know who did it?
Yes, because God is a suspect. God is one of the suspects, and then nature would be the other one.
Is Mickey Mouse a suspect? Is Lord Voldemort a suspect?
I'm not saying that I know what God looks like. So, yeah, if that's what God looks like, then I don't know what he looks like.
Which God is suspect? The Jewish God, the Hindu gods?
Right now, I'm just saying the Creator God because
how do you know there's a Creator God?
The other gods.
How do you know there's a Creator God? You don't get to say that something...
the evidence that was left behind.
There is no evidence. None. Nada. Zip. Zil. Zero. I just did a video on this the other day. Evidence for a proposition has to be evidence for a proposition. And a proposition is not God. The proposition is God exists. And any evidence that should be counted for the proposition God exists, that evidence must necessarily tie those two words together. It just can't be consistent with both of those words because as for the example from my video, if the accusation is that Matt killed Steve, the fact that I exist is not evidence that I killed Steve. It's required for that to be true, but it's not evidence I did because I exist independent of whether or not I killed Steve. If it turns out that I don't exist, then clearly the proposition Matt killed Steve cannot be true. And hang on.
Okay.
If you don't know whether or not I exist, how could you ever include me as a candidate?
You were one of the suspects from the beginning.
You don't even know if I exist. If I find Steve dead,
that's what I'm trying to prove with the courtroom analogy.
Shut up. If I find Steve dead, and I tell you, Fergal Burgle Manergle Burgle killed Steve, is Fergal Burgle Manergle Burgle a candidate? If you don't know that person exists.
Well, if we find
that's a yes or no.
We find evidence that Fergal Manergle Badorgle Diggle did it, then yes, then we can say that he's a candidate.
Exactly. The second that we have evidence that individual actually exists and is potentially a candidate, that's when they become a candidate. But you can't do that for God.
Yeah, I mean, God is just one of the options.
No, it's not.
Okay. Adrian?
Sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
It's okay. It's your show.
You
can hang up on people on your show.
I'm
just
juicy.
Can't hang up on them on mine. So check out the Raven Paradox. It might kind of get you thinking in a different way about something very, very related, and it might help you start kind of making sense of those things. Last, but certainly not least, Traci in Arkansas, I wanted to save you, to talk to you last because it absolutely is something I want to talk about. So Traci, you're live with Matt and Eric. How are you doing?
Hi, Eric. Hi, Matt. I am so glad I get to talk to both of you.
Yay. We're glad we get to talk to you, too.
That's an atypical feeling for today, clearly, because I'm not sure that most of the other people called were happy that they talked to me today.
I'm happy they talked to them. That was fun.
All right. No, I'm always happy to talk with you guys. And when I saw that Eric was on, I had to call.
Yay.
Cool. How can we help?
Well, I think that my topic is a little along the same lines as the last guy, but not quite that intense. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I used to live in California. Now we've moved to Arkansas. Totally different world.
Yeah.
And what I'm dealing with
whereabouts in Arkansas? I know it's a distraction.
That's okay. I'm in Van Buren, right on the Oklahoma border.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very pretty here, by the way.
Yeah.
But anyways, coming from California, I'm used to dealing with earthquakes. I mean, I've been in 5 in my entire life. But out here, we get tornadoes. Okay, well, to summarize, a couple of weeks ago, Matt and Eric, I bet you experienced it too, that tornado outbreak. Yep. I think it was in Texas too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from California too. That scared the shit out of me.
I was actually in Missouri at the time, and I have relatives in the Joplin area who've been hit multiple times now. And of course, Seth Andrews, who likely will be co-hosting with me in a few weeks, maybe.
Which I'll call in.
He's in Tulsa. He's in Tornado Alley and has a tornado hideaway in his garage that he did a video about.
Oh, well, I'll have to watch that because I've said before I love Seth Andrews. Yeah. But anyways, coming from California and having to deal with tornadoes during that tornado outbreak, I mean, I've never heard sirens go off, and that's the scariest sound I've ever heard in my life. I actually ran crying across the street to my neighbors because I was scared and nobody was here. I'm like, we're going to die. But
that's terrifying.
Long story short, what's that?
It's terrifying. Go ahead.
Okay. Long story short, I started calling you guys about a year ago, and I'm coming closer and closer to calling myself an atheist. I'm not there yet. And it's stuff like this that makes me hang on to the belief in God. Just the sheer... Thankfully, Van Buren did not get hit by a tornado.
Hang on. Please.
Yeah. Okay.
So the fact that the Earth produces strong vortex winds that are destructive and capricious is keeping you hanging on to God?
No, not. What I mean is just the sheer power that's in those types of storms. It makes me wonder. I know there's scientific principles involved, but I don't know. It just makes me wonder, man, is this God's doing? I don't know.
Okay, so tornadoes have an entirely natural physical explanation that is incredibly well understood, which is why you get sirens now before they start ripping up the countryside. There's nothing about them that are supernatural or even have a gap to stick a God in, other than if you think that God is an evil prick who's trying to wipe out Joplin, Missouri every 8 years.
Right, yeah. Well, okay, check this out. What about the examples of, you watch these weather documentaries. I watched one about Tuscaloosa last night. And there was an old lady in her house sitting in her living room. The house was destroyed all around her, but she survived. And they said if she hadn't been in her living room, she'd be gone. And it makes me think, okay, did God protect her?
Traci, if that's the case, then you also have to accept that God brutally slaughtered everyone who didn't survive. Right?
And destroyed her entire house except for her living room.
I mean, this is not a one-sided thing, but also that's just playing into this. The more the thing that makes me more curious is why add the extra structures over what is already an amazing, beautiful, incredible, terrifying, wonderful world that we have? Why put extra stuff on?
It seems like what you're doing is, wow, I wonder if that could be God. But wondering if something could be God is separate from saying, oh yeah, I'm convinced that's God. And in the prospect of wondering if something is God, first of all, given the last caller, you point out I don't think you get to include God as a candidate explanation until you demonstrate it's a candidate explanation. But if you think about what kind of God is it that offers no discrete evidence for his existence, does not clearly communicate with people about what he wants or doesn't want, and yet demonstrates power by using entirely natural processes to destroy cities and then save one woman in her living room after taking out the rest of her house? What possible reasonable purpose? And first of all, if you're going to demonstrate your power, like that would be like me trying to demonstrate my mind reading powers by just not showing up and having Eric say, hey, Matt totally predicted that. Nothing about that makes sense. And if the only thing that's keeping you hanging there is, well, it could be this. Well, first of all, you don't know that it could be that. You just can't show that it's not. And that means that the God prospect is an unfalsifiable proposition. And in science and in skepticism, do you know what we should do with unfalsifiable propositions?
I'm not sure. Tell me.
Set them on the great big I don't fucking know shelf until they become falsifiable. Whoops.
Okay.
Don't know. Maybe I'll come back and look at this one later. Have we got a falsifiable prospect now? Because if there's no way to show that something could be false, you can sit forever and go, gosh, I wonder if it's true. Because you can never be shown wrong. What kind of God operates on the basis of, well, I know I'm the all-powerful creator and governor of the universe and the source of all morality, but I'm going to sit here and just let people argue, and I'm not going to talk to any of them because you can't prove I don't exist as long as I'm hiding.
Yeah. Well,
the people who would point to tornadoes as potentially God are the same people who point to cancer as potentially God, the same people who point to mental illness as potentially God. It's you can do that for everything. It's the same people who point to why that tree leans because of God or why DNA because of God. They are all the same.
The time to believe it is when the evidence points towards it.
Yep.
That's the time. That's the right time. Not before that. And it's okay. It's okay not to know. I mean.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's fantastic. We couldn't have gotten to the amazing amount of wonderful things that we have invented and created in 2019 without I don't know. Right? How can we live longer? How can we grow crops out of season? How can we travel and keep in touch across the world? Right? All of these different advancements we've made start with I don't know. You're giving yourself permission to learn.
And the thing is, the things where you're wondering if maybe it's God, in some cases, there are things that you can learn about, like science, physics, tornadoes, etc.
Tornadoes.
Are you at home Are you at home right now?
I am at home, and there's actually a storm rolling in. I'm so scared.
Okay. Well, do you have a television?
I do.
Have you ever been watching television and, like, something strange happens? Like, I don't know, the screen goes black for too long or the volume increases too much or decreases too much when you didn't touch the remote control or anything else?
Oh, yeah.
You ever wondered if that was God?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. It's only those grand things where our ignorance is profound, where things are unfamiliar. Your television's familiar. You know it does weird shit on occasion. You know that the commercials tend to have a louder volume. You know that sometimes stations stop transmitting. It doesn't even give you a moment's pause other than to go, I wonder when my show's going to come back on. That's it.
Right.
Nobody goes, wonder if that could have been God. When we find a dead body, we never ask, hey, did God kill that one? Is God a candidate suspect in this? It's only in things where our ignorance is palpable.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when the things that we're concerned about, because of our ignorance, are things where we can eliminate that ignorance by actually going out and investigating, like learning about tornadoes, that's on us. That is us saying, I don't care enough to, and I'm not beating you up over this. I do it all the time on all kinds of things. Lots of things I don't care about. But it's us saying, I don't care enough to look into this. And at a minimum, we should recognize that if we haven't cared enough to look into it, we shouldn't be reaching any conclusion, let alone maybe it's God.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing is, I actually understand how tornadoes work. And so, but yet I just still can't let go of the idea that God created it. But I think it was Eric that said, I'm ignoring, God created it and 250 people died. I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, it's like when there's a bus accident and one person survives and everybody else dies, and they point to the survivor and go, oh, look, it's a miracle. God saved that person.
It's like God kills 27 people today on the bus.
Or what's worse, when the tornadoes rip through and like the only thing left in the house that, wasn't damaged and destroyed was the family Bible. Oh my gosh, look at God showing his magnificence by saving a book while people died. All those people, they're just people. They've gone on to heaven to be with Jesus.
But the book survived.
We saved the book, and that was to send a specific message to all the people who are credulous buffoons.
And I've had a caller call in and say, would you not pray to God if you were stranded in the middle of a field in a car accident, about to die, phone is dead? Would you not call out to God for help? And the response is, your God put me there, if that's the case. If you live in a world where that God creates all of those situations, then it's a fucking terrifying world. And that doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true or not. But as a side note, notions like justice and human kindness and empathy, that's a powerful thing when we recognize that we're all we got.
It's also
so if wonder is something that blows your mind and pushes you to it, there are better tools to use. But even if that was the only tool you use, this world we live in is wondrous enough.
But even if I was in that car in a field, even if I decided to pray, to scream out for God, only thing that proves is that when things are desperate, I'll flail around at things whether I believe in them or not. It's not proof of a God. People want to play this up as if it shows a secret belief in God tucked deep in my head. Like you secretly believe in God. I had an aunt pull me aside the other day and was like, "You really do believe in God, don't you?" And I'm like, "No." No, do you think I've been lying all these years? It doesn't make any sense. But even if in desperation I reached out to a God, that's not evidence for a God. That's evidence I'm desperate.
Yeah.
And you know what else? If that's the best somebody can do, to say, you know what? When you run out of all other options, when you have no other explanations, even you will reach out to God. All that is an admission that that's exactly what they're doing. They've run out of other options, and so they're flailing about trying to reach out to a God. Doesn't tell you anything about God. What it tells you about is what humans are like, that we're flawed, desperate thinkers.
We're scared of death. We're scared of pain.
Oh, yeah.
We're afraid of
suffering. A tornado is one way I do not want to die.
Yeah, you put a gun to my head, I'll tell you whatever you want. Jesus is real. He loves me. I love Jesus. Jesus is awesome. Oh, wait, no. I meant praise be to Muhammad. Whoever's got the gun is going to dictate what I'm saying.
Yeah, understandable. No, guys, as always, you guys give me a lot to think about. So I'm going to take what you said and turn it over in my head. I'm not quite ready to let go of the belief just yet, but I'm working on it.
I think I told you last time we talked that you're going to find that the solace that you get from religious thinking over time, it just stops being effective. It stops holding that special place in your heart because you start to become disenchanted. But you're not on my time scale. You're not on Matt's time scale. We're not sitting here with a stopwatch going,
God damn, Traci, what's taking you so long?
Take the time that you need.
Yeah.
On that note, we appreciate the call. We are like
thank you.
way over time. So call us back another time. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Dude, this was a lot of fun.
Oh, I always have fun with you. Yeah. Even when I'm ranting and throwing fits about why people can't, like literally when the question is that, like you think about how to argue.
Yeah.
Okay. And as somebody who's done this a lot, what goes through my head is three things. What would possibly convince me or change my mind? What would make this make sense to me? And what has been useful in other circumstances having a conversation with somebody that I don't agree with? And when those lead me to something that should be obvious, like, hey, would you be my servant under the Exodus 21 rules? And there's a pause, I don't know what to do.
Honestly, where I sit with it is letting them sit in that, because that is an intense discomfort.
Yeah, the problem with Ryan earlier is that he wasn't sitting with it and there was no intense discomfort. It was, let me make another excuse. Let me talk about context. This is disingenuous. Of course that stuff riles me up.
But you know what?
And the other caller who was like, oh, I've psychoanalyzed you and you just hate religion. Well, you're wrong. You're not wrong. There are things about religion I absolutely despise, but the reason I despise them isn't because, as that person would suspect, that they're true and I'm in denial. It's because those religious views are in opposition to freedom and reason and humanism, and not necessarily even in that order. But then we get other calls where people can have a conversation and where when you ask a question, you almost get an answer to the question you asked.
Or they say, I don't know.
And that's good.
That's awesome.
It reminds me of countless conversations like one the other week where somebody was like, oh, acting as if we're not taking the question seriously or we're not willing to consider the question. I'm like, we're on a TV show where we take all this. It's not our fault. So if you think that God, here's my closing thought because everybody's hungry. If you think that God can't be demonstrated, you're done. You're admitting that you don't have a good reason to believe because demonstration is the good reason. So if you think that and you say that at any point during the call, and yet you also called to present evidence for God, or in some cases, irrefutable evidence for God, you are now in a state of massive conflict. If you believe that God can be demonstrated, by all means, do so. I don't know what's taken him so long. World record hide and seek champion. If you think that God can't be demonstrated, by all means, you can call in and say that. But don't try to give evidence for God. Yeah. You either think that there's a God or you don't. You either think that God can be demonstrated or you don't. You can't do both. And that's what people are quite often trying to do, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Hey, before we go, can we get one more shot of the people in the back? They've stayed late so we can do this. Thank you so much. We have an amazing live studio audience. Thank you for coming out.
Because each of our hour and a half shows ran 2 hours and some change. So let's give everybody a break. Eric, awesome.
Matt,
thanks for hanging out.
Always nice hanging out.
Have a good trip to Nashville.
We'll do.
I'll be back next week with Dawn for a little nostalgia, probably a failure, and lots of calls where I may not yell as much. See you.
Have a good week.
Let's just